Princess Amelia sat under a large tree in the middle of the bush, her body trembling with fear and pain. She was only 16 years old, but her life had changed forever. Tears ran down her face as she held the tiny baby boy in her arms. His cries echoed through the quiet night. "I'm so sorry, my son," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please forgive me. I wish things were different. I wish I could take you home, but I can't." She cried harder, pressing her forehead against the baby's soft skin. Her heart was breaking into a million pieces. She wanted to love him, to raise him, to protect him. But she was trapped. Her father's voice kept ringing in her head, loud and angry. "No child of mine will bring shame to this family. If you get pregnant before marriage, you are no longer my daughter." Amelia wiped her tears quickly, but more kept falling. She looked around. The bush was thick and dark. No one would find her here, at least not quickly. She had planned it like that. At school, far away from the palace, no one knew she was pregnant. She wore big clothes and kept to herself. She hid the growing baby inside her for 9 long months, pretending everything was normal. She smiled during classes, she laughed with her friends, but inside she was scared, every single day. Now the secret was out, the baby was here, and Amelia had no choice. "I love you so much," she said, placing the crying baby on a soft patch of grass she had prepared with her own scarf. "But I have to leave you. I don't want to, my sweet boy. But I have to. It's the only way you can live." Her hands shook as she tucked the cloth around the tiny child. She kissed his forehead again and again. Her heart screamed for her to pick him back up and run far, far away. But she couldn't. She was a princess. She was her father's pride, or at least she had been. If he found out she had given birth, he would throw her out like garbage. Her mother, her brothers, her whole family would turn away from her. Amelia stood up slowly, her legs weak. She took one last look at her son. His small hands waved in the air, reaching for her. The sight shattered her heart. "I will always love you," she whispered. "I hope someone good finds you. Someone better than me." She turned and ran with tears blinding her eyes, with pain stabbing her heart, with guilt weighing down her soul. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The night swallowed her as she disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind the most precious thing she had ever known. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson were driving home late that night. They had just left a family friend's party. The road was dark and lonely. Only the sound of their car engine filled the silence. Suddenly, the car coughed and stopped in the middle of nowhere. Mr. Wilson tried to start it again, but the engine only made strange noises. "What's wrong with the car?" Mrs. Wilson asked, fear in her voice. "I don't know," Mr. Wilson said, frowning, "but this is not a good place to stop. It's too dark and quiet." They sat in silence, listening to the night. Then Mrs. Wilson heard something, a soft, weak sound coming from the bushes. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" Mr. Wilson asked, his hands still busy turning the key. "A baby crying," Mrs. Wilson said, her eyes wide with shock. Mr. Wilson shook his head. "It's probably a cat, a bird, or some wild animal. They make sounds like that to trick people. You better stay in the car." Mrs. Wilson listened again. The cry was soft but real. Her heart pounded. "No," she said firmly, "that's a newborn baby. I can feel it." Mr. Wilson sighed and said harshly, "And how would you know? You've never even given birth to a child before." Mrs. Wilson's face fell. His words hurt deeply, like a knife in her heart. For many years she had prayed for a child but had none. Still, she wiped her tears quickly and said, "Child or not, I know that cry. I must save that child." Without waiting for her husband, she opened the car door and stepped into the darkness. "Margaret," Mr. Wilson called after her, but she didn't stop. Carefully, she moved closer to the sound, using the light from her phone to guide her. The cries grew louder. Then, under a big tree, she saw him, a tiny baby wrapped in a scarf, crying helplessly. "Oh my God," she gasped. She knelt down and gently picked up the child, holding him close to her chest. Tears of joy filled her eyes. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, rocking the baby gently. "Thank you for giving me this miracle. I name you gift. You are a gift from God." Smiling through her tears, she walked back to the car. Mr. Wilson was standing outside, waiting. When he saw the baby in her arms, he stepped back. "Are you crazy?" he shouted. "This baby might be cursed. I don't want this child." Mrs. Wilson held the baby tighter. "I don't care what you say. This child is from God. I am taking him home." Mr. Wilson shook his head in anger and went back into the car. He turned the key one more time, and to his surprise, the car started immediately. He looked at the baby in his wife's arms, his mouth falling open. Just moments ago, the car was dead. Now it was running smoothly. Without another word, he drove off into the night, his wife sitting beside him, cradling baby Gift with a peaceful smile. In her heart, she knew her life had changed forever. The next morning, the sun was bright, but the mood inside the Wilsons' house was heavy. Mrs. Wilson sat on the couch, feeding little Gift with a bottle of warm milk. The baby looked so peaceful, his tiny fingers wrapping around hers. Every time she looked at him, her heart filled with love she had never felt before. But Mr. Wilson was not smiling. He paced up and down the living room, his hands behind his back. "Margaret, we need to talk," he said at last, breaking the silence. Mrs. Wilson looked up at him, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. "We must take that baby to the orphanage today," he said firmly. "We don't know where he came from. We don't know his family. It's the best thing for everyone." Mrs. Wilson's heart sank. She hugged the baby closer to her chest protectively, as if someone was trying to pull him away. "No, my dear husband," she said softly but firmly. "Please listen to me. This child is a gift from God. He was sent to us." Mr. Wilson shook his head. "Margaret, be reasonable. We can't just keep a child we found in the bush. What if the police come asking questions? What if the baby is cursed?" Tears welled up in Mrs. Wilson's eyes, but she wiped them quickly. "Have you not wondered why our car suddenly stopped last night?" she asked, her voice shaking. "And have you not wondered why the car started immediately after I picked up the baby?" Mr. Wilson paused, his face slowly changing. He remembered the fear he felt when the car wouldn't start. He remembered how everything seemed hopeless. And then, after Margaret returned with the baby, the engine roared to life like nothing had happened. "You and I have been trying for a child for years, my love," Mrs. Wilson continued, her voice breaking. "We have prayed. We have fasted. We have cried in secret. But no result. Maybe this is how God decided to answer us. Maybe he brought this child to us in the middle of nowhere because he knew we would love him." Mr. Wilson sat down heavily in a chair, rubbing his face with both hands. He stayed quiet for a long time, thinking deeply. Finally, he looked up at her. "All right, Margaret," he said quietly. "We will keep him." Mrs. Wilson gasped with joy. "Thank you, my dear husband. Thank you." "But," Mr. Wilson added with a small smile, "that does not mean we will stop trying to have our own biological children." Mrs. Wilson laughed through her tears. "Of course not. But whether we do or not, this child is ours now. He is our miracle." Mr. Wilson stood up and walked over to where she was sitting. He looked at the tiny baby boy sleeping peacefully in her arms. Slowly, he reached out and touched the baby's small hand. The baby squeezed his finger tightly. A strange feeling moved in Mr. Wilson's heart, a warmth he had never known before. He smiled. "Welcome to the family, Gift," he whispered. And for the first time in a very long time, their house was filled with laughter, joy, and the sweet sound of a baby's soft breathing. Meanwhile, far away at the Royal Academy, where Princess Amelia studied, she sat quietly in her room. The sun was shining outside, but inside her heart, there was only sadness. Her phone rang. It was her mother, the Queen. Amelia wiped her eyes quickly and answered the call, trying to sound normal. "Hello, Mama," she said softly. "My daughter," the Queen said with a warm voice. "How are you? Your father and I have been very worried. You haven't come home for months. Are you sure you are fine?" "I'm fine, Mama," Amelia replied quickly. "I am a big girl now. I can take good care of myself." The Queen sighed. "You must come home this weekend. We are having a family meeting. Your father insists. We want to see you, my dear." Amelia's heart sank. She didn't want to go home. She was scared they would find out everything. But she had no choice. "Okay, Mama," she said quietly. As soon as the call ended, Amelia dropped the phone and burst into tears. Her whole body shook with pain. God, please forgive me, she cried. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to leave my baby there. But I was so scared. She hugged herself tightly, rocking back and forth on her bed. Regret filled her heart like a heavy stone. Suddenly, there was a knock on her door. Before she could answer, her boyfriend Daniel walked in. When Amelia saw him, her sadness turned into anger. She jumped up from the bed, her face red with rage. "See what you made me do," she shouted. "You are wicked. You are foolish. You are heartless." Daniel stood frozen, guilt all over his face. His hands trembled. "I'm sorry, Amelia. I regret everything. I swear I do. Please, let's go back to the bush. Maybe we can still find the baby." Amelia stared at him like he had lost his mind. She wiped her tears harshly. "You fool," she cried. "Do you think my baby is still there? It's been 2 days. 2 whole days. Wild animals must have eaten him by now. My poor son, my sweet son, he is gone because of you." She fell to her knees, crying bitterly. Daniel rushed to her side and held her. "I will never forgive myself," he said, his own eyes wet with tears. "Never. I pushed you into this. I was supposed to protect you, not cause you pain." Amelia pushed him away weakly. "I hate you. I hate you for what you made me do." "But I hate myself even more," Daniel whispered. The room was filled with sadness, regret, and deep pain, 2 young hearts broken by one terrible mistake. Amelia looked up to the ceiling and whispered again, "God, please forgive me. Please protect my son, wherever he is. Something tells me he's alive." Deep inside her, a small hope remained, a hope that somehow, somewhere, her son was alive. The weekend came faster than Amelia wanted. Her heart was heavy as she packed her bag and boarded the royal car that had come to pick her up. As the palace gates opened, she felt like she was walking into a trap. She forced a smile as she got down from the car. The Queen rushed out to welcome her with open arms. "My daughter," she said, hugging Amelia tightly. "Oh, how I have missed you." "I missed you too, Mama," Amelia said, her voice low. The Queen stepped back and looked at her closely. She touched Amelia's cheeks and forehead, checking her as if she was sick. "You are glowing," the Queen said, smiling, "but why is your breast this big?" Amelia's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She laughed nervously and said, "It's nothing, Mama. I'm just growing. You know, I'm becoming a woman." The Queen frowned, not fully convinced. She looked at Amelia's body carefully. "You look pregnant," the Queen said slowly, her eyes narrowing. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She quickly shook her head. "No, Mama, I don't even have a boyfriend. How can I get pregnant?" she said sharply, her voice almost shaking. The Queen nodded, but her face was still serious. "You better not be lying, Amelia," she said firmly. "Because if your father finds out you are pregnant, he will finish you. You know the rule, no boyfriend until you turn 18. Not even a handshake." "Yes, Mama, I know, I promise," Amelia said quickly. The Queen smiled and rubbed her back. "Good girl, keep it that way." Amelia forced herself to smile, but inside she felt like crying again. She had lied to her mother. She had already broken the biggest rule of the palace. And worse, she had abandoned her own child. Trying to change the topic, Amelia asked, "So, Mama, when are we starting the family meeting?" The Queen laughed lightly and patted her shoulder. "There is no meeting, my dear," she said. Amelia blinked in confusion. "No meeting?" The Queen shook her head. "I just missed you. I wanted to see you with my own eyes. I wanted to make sure you are all right." Amelia's heart sank deeper. Her mother had called her home out of love and worry, and here she was, hiding a terrible secret. "Thank you, Mama," she said quietly, feeling even more guilty. The Queen smiled and hugged her again. "You are my baby girl. Always remember that." As they walked into the palace together, Amelia prayed in her heart. "God, please forgive me. Help me make things right someday." A few months later, life at the Wilsons' house had changed. At first, everything had been peaceful. Baby Gift grew stronger every day. His smile could light up a room, and his tiny laughter brought joy to Mrs. Wilson's heart. She loved him as her own. She even forgot sometimes that he wasn't her biological son. But trouble soon knocked at their door. Mr. Wilson lost his job. The company where he worked for years closed down suddenly. Bills started piling up. Food became scarce. Happiness left their home like smoke blown away by the wind. Mr. Wilson became a different man. The once joyful husband was now always angry, bitter, and cold. He would sit in the living room for hours, staring at nothing. Sometimes he would storm out and not come back until late at night, smelling of alcohol. One evening, after coming back from the bar drunk again, he kicked the chair across the room and shouted at Margaret. "Since that cursed boy entered this house," he roared, "everything has turned from bad to worse. I should have never allowed you to keep him." Margaret, who was feeding little Gift, looked up in shock. "Wilson, don't say that," she cried. "Gift is not cursed. He is a blessing from the Most High God." Wilson laughed bitterly, a cruel laugh that didn't touch his eyes. "Your so-called God," he mocked. "Where has your God been all these years? Tell me, why haven't you given me even one child of my own?" Margaret's heart broke at his words, but she stood her ground. "God's time is the best," she said softly. "He has a plan for us." But her gentle words only made Wilson angrier. He staggered towards her, his finger pointing in her face. "Listen to me, woman," he growled. "You have to choose. It's either me or that cursed child. I will not live under the same roof with bad luck." Margaret stood up, holding Gift tightly to her chest. "You are the cursed one here, Wilson, not my son," she shouted back, her own anger boiling over. "You lost your job, and instead of fighting for your family, the best thing you can do is run to the bar and get drunk. How pathetic can you be, Wilson?" Wilson's eyes burned with rage, his face turned red. "Don't you ever call me a drunk again with your smelly mouth," he barked. "You barren woman, you are still talking to me like you are a queen." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. "I may not have carried this child in my womb," she said, her voice strong, "but I am a mother because I chose to love him. You, Wilson, you are nothing but a coward." Wilson raised his hand as if to hit her, but Margaret didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eyes. "Go ahead," she said bravely. "Hit me. Show the world what a real man you are." For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Only the sound of baby Gift's soft breathing filled the room. Slowly, Wilson dropped his hand. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that the walls shook. Margaret sat down on the floor, holding Gift tightly, tears running down her face. "Don't worry, my son," she whispered. "I will protect you. I will never leave you. You are not a curse. You are my blessing." And in that moment, Margaret made a silent promise. No matter what it cost her, she would fight for her son. Back at school, Princess Amelia's life was falling apart. No matter how hard she tried, she was failing her exams. Her once bright future was now dark and blurry. She spent nights studying, crying over her books, but nothing made sense anymore. Her teachers were surprised. Amelia had always been a brilliant student, but now she was slipping badly. One evening, after receiving another bad grade, Amelia locked herself in her room and cried bitterly. "Maybe it's because of my son," she thought sadly. "Maybe God is punishing me for abandoning him in the bush." Her heart was heavy with guilt. She wished she could turn back time. She wished she had been brave enough to protect her baby. Just then, there was a knock on her door. She wiped her tears quickly, thinking it was one of her friends. But when she opened the door, it was Daniel, her boyfriend. Seeing him standing there made her anger boil over. "You," she shouted, pushing him back. "Get out. I hate you. You ruined my life." "Please, Amelia, listen to me," Daniel begged. "I'm sorry. I regret everything." "I curse the day I met you, Daniel," she cried. "You made me lose my child. You made me lie to my parents. You made me a criminal in my own heart." Daniel stood there, helpless, as she slammed the door in his face. Feeling ashamed, Daniel went back home. His heart was heavy with guilt. When he entered his house, his mother saw his face and knew something was wrong. "What is it, Daniel?" she asked sharply. Daniel broke down and told her everything. About Amelia, about the pregnancy, and about the baby they abandoned. At first, his mother was furious. "Is that why we sent you to school?" she shouted. "To go and get someone pregnant? You are just 18 years old. How foolish can you be?" Daniel bowed his head in shame. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered. His mother sat down heavily, breathing hard. After a long silence, she said in a softer voice, "What you and that girl did is terrible. Very terrible. But we cannot change the past. We must now find a way to make things right. Daniel looked up at her, hope in his eyes. His mother continued, "Now I understand why I have been having bad dreams. Dreams of a baby crying, calling for help. I thought it was just my imagination." Daniel's heart jumped. "You saw a baby crying in your dreams?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "I don't think the baby is dead. He is alive. He needs you." Without wasting time, she took Daniel to see a man of God, a respected pastor known for his visions and prayers. The man of God listened carefully and then closed his eyes to pray. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and spoke. "The child is not dead," he said. "He is alive. God kept him safe, and very soon the child will find his way back to you. But you must be ready to receive him with love." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't believe it. His son was alive. Filled with hope, he rushed outside and called Princess Amelia immediately. When she answered, she was cold. "What do you want, Daniel?" she snapped. "Amelia, listen to me," he said quickly. "The baby is alive. We just came back from the powerful man of God. He said the child is safe and will come home soon." Amelia froze. Her heart raced. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. A wave of relief washed over her, but the pain of everything she had been through was still fresh. "You denied the pregnancy," she said bitterly. "You made me feel alone. You made me feel like a sinner." "I know," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I was scared. I was a coward. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. But now I see that I hurt you and our child. I am so sorry, Amelia. Please, forgive me." Amelia closed her eyes, tears falling down her cheeks. "God, please help me," she whispered. 2 years had passed. Princess Amelia was now 18, but the guilt inside her had only grown heavier with time. Every night she saw her son's face in her dreams, crying for her. Every day she lived with the pain of what she had done. No matter how hard she tried to hide it, it showed in her eyes. One evening, Amelia could no longer bear the weight of her secret. She went to her father, King Edward, and knelt before him in the great palace hall. Tears poured down her cheeks as she said, "Father, I have sinned. Please listen to me." The king leaned forward, frowning deeply. "Speak, Amelia." Shaking and sobbing, she told him everything. How she got pregnant at 16, how Daniel denied the pregnancy, how she gave birth alone in the bush and abandoned her baby because she was scared of being disowned. When she finished, the king's face was dark with anger. His hands trembled on the arms of his throne. "You abandoned my first grandchild, in the bush," he roared. His voice echoed through the palace walls. Amelia fell flat on the floor, crying, "I'm sorry, Papa. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Daniel denied me. I was ashamed to bring a fatherless child into this family. I was young and ignorant. Please forgive me." The king stood up and walked back and forth. His heart was broken, but seeing his daughter crying made him soften a little. "You were foolish," he said at last, his voice quieter. "But you are still my daughter. I forgive you." Amelia looked up, tears of relief filling her eyes. "But we must find that child," King Edward said firmly, "wherever he is." Immediately, the king sent for the palace chief priest, a wise and respected man. When the chief priest arrived, King Edward asked him, "Is my grandson still alive?" The chief priest closed his eyes, prayed silently, and then said, "Yes, your majesty. The child is very much alive, but you must hurry. The woman caring for him has a good heart, but the man living with him is not a good person. Trouble is near." "What must we do?" asked the king. The chief priest replied, "Announce it across the country. Tell the truth. Say that 2 years ago a royal baby was abandoned in a bush. Offer a reward to anyone who might have found a newborn baby around that area at that time. Let the news reach every corner." King Edward nodded. "Make the reward 50 million naira. We must find him quickly." That same evening, the announcement was made on all TV stations and radio stations. Big letters flashed on the screen. "Royal family searching for abandoned baby. If you found a baby in Jagadi Bush area 2 years ago, please contact the palace immediately. Reward 50 million naira." The news spread like wildfire. People talked about it everywhere, at the markets, in buses, on the streets, and even in faraway villages. Meanwhile, Mrs. Wilson was at the market, buying tomatoes and onions. As she waited for the seller to weigh her things, she overheard two women gossiping. "Have you heard?" one woman said excitedly. "The king is offering 50 million naira for anyone who found a baby abandoned in the bush 2 years ago." "Ah," the other woman cried, "if only I had found that baby. By now I would be rich. My suffering would be over." "Me too," laughed the first woman. "Why didn't I go to that bush that night? My village life would have changed forever." Mrs. Wilson stood frozen. The bag of onions dropped from her hand. A baby, abandoned in the bush. 2 years ago, she thought, her heart racing. Could it be my gift? She quickly gathered her things, paid without waiting for change, and hurried out of the market. Her heart beat so fast she could barely breathe. Mrs. Wilson ran all the way home, her heart pounding so loudly it echoed in her ears. As she pushed open the door, she saw Mr. Wilson sitting on the old couch, drinking from a bottle. Baby Gift was playing quietly on the floor with a worn-out toy. "Wilson, Wilson," she cried out. Mr. Wilson looked up lazily. "What is it, woman? Why are you shouting like a mad person?" Mrs. Wilson took a deep breath and said, "Have you heard the news? The royal family is looking for a baby that was abandoned in the bush 2 years ago. They are offering 50 million naira to anyone who found the child." Wilson smirked and leaned back on the couch. "Of course I heard," he said casually. "It's all over the radio and TV. Wilson," she said firmly, "we must return Gift. He is not ours. He belongs to the palace. He is a royal child." At once Mr. Wilson's face changed. His eyes grew hard. "Never," he shouted, slamming his bottle on the table. "Never will I let that boy leave this house," Mrs. Wilson gasped. "But you said he was a cursed child," she reminded him. "You called him bad luck. You blamed him for your job loss. Why are you fighting for him now?" Wilson stood up and pointed a finger at her. "Because he is mine now," he barked. "You, woman, have not given me any child since we married. Not even a miscarriage. Until then, that boy is mine. I don't care if they offer 1 billion naira. He is not going anywhere." Mrs. Wilson's eyes filled with tears. She loved Gift deeply, but she knew the truth. She could not keep someone else's child forever. "Wilson," she said, her voice shaking, "we must do the right thing. Though I love Gift with all my heart, he deserves to know his real parents. He deserves to live the life God planned for him." Wilson's face twisted in anger. "I will not let you," he shouted. "If you try to take him away, I swear I will unalive myself." Mrs. Wilson felt fear rise in her chest, but she held her ground. "I don't care about your threats," she said bravely. "I will find the palace phone number and call them tomorrow morning. They must know that their child is alive." Wilson stared at her coldly, his mind racing. That night, as Mrs. Wilson cooked their evening meal, Wilson stood in the kitchen doorway watching her. His face was dark and full of evil thoughts. "If she calls the palace, my life is over," he thought bitterly. "The boy will leave. I will have nothing, no wife, no child, nothing." An evil idea entered his mind. When Mrs. Wilson wasn't looking, he slipped into the cupboard and took out a small bottle of powder he had hidden long ago. A wicked man at the bar had given it to him once, jokingly, saying it could make anyone sleep forever. Wilson poured the powder into Mrs. Wilson's food carefully, making sure she didn't notice. Later they sat at the table. Wilson barely touched his food, but Mrs. Wilson, tired from the day's stress, ate hungrily. After the meal, she yawned deeply. "I'm so tired," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Go and rest," Wilson said, pretending to care. "You have had a long day." Mrs. Wilson kissed little Gift on the forehead and went to the bedroom. She lay on the bed and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was deeply asleep. Wilson waited. Hours passed. Then he walked slowly to the bedroom, opened the door, and looked at her. She was not breathing. Wilson stood there for a long time, his heart beating fast. Just as Wilson was pacing around the house, thinking of what to do next, he heard a loud knock on the door. "Who is that again?" he shouted angrily. "It's me, Mama Janet," a rough voice replied. "I came to borrow some salt." Wilson swallowed hard. His mind raced fast. "My wife is not back from outing," he lied quickly, his voice harsh. "But Mama Janet, the noisiest neighbor, was not someone you could easily send away." "I beg, Wilson, let me just go inside and get it myself," she said. "My soup is already burning on the fire. I really need the salt." Before Wilson could stop her, she pushed the door open wider and started walking toward the kitchen. Wilson blocked her way, shouting, "Are you mad? Leave my house, you foolish woman. Ordinary salt you don't have, and you are disturbing me. Later you will be shouting that you and your useless husband have money." Mama Janet dropped her bag in anger and placed her hands on her waist. "Wilson, you are a disgrace," she fired back. "Since you lost your job years ago, have you gotten another one? Is it not your wife that is feeding you and that boy you are calling your son? Lazy fool. Instead of working like other men, you are busy drinking and gossiping like market women. Go and work, useless man." Before Wilson could reply, Mama Janet picked up her bag, spat on the ground in front of him, and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Wilson was shaking with anger. His pride was crushed. He cursed under his breath and turned to go back into the house. But when he stepped inside the bedroom, he froze in shock. Mrs. Wilson was alive. She was lying weakly on the bed, her eyes half open, struggling to breathe. She tried to sit up but fell back, too weak to move. Wilson's heart jumped into his mouth. "I thought she was dead," he thought, panic filling his mind. Quickly he rushed to her side. "My dear, you are sick," he said, forcing a calm voice. "You are very sick. You need to rest." Mrs. Wilson looked confused. Her memory was blurry. She could not remember what had happened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out, only a faint sound. "You must stay inside," Wilson said, pretending to be caring. "Don't go outside. I'll go and get you some strong medicine." Mrs. Wilson blinked slowly, too weak to argue or even think straight. Wilson stood up and looked at her coldly. If she remembers anything, he thought, I'm finished. Before leaving the house, Wilson turned to little Gift, who was sitting on the floor, watching everything with his wide, innocent eyes. Wilson pointed at him and hissed, "You little witch. By the time I finish with you, you will regret the day you entered this house. Don't worry, your time is coming." Gift didn't understand his words, but he felt the anger. He started crying quietly, afraid. Wilson slammed the door hard and left the house, heading toward the town. Inside the house, the air was heavy with sadness. Gift cried in one corner, and Mrs. Wilson, weak and broken, lay helpless on the bed, whispering words no one could hear. The house was no longer a home. It was a place of danger, fear, and silent prayers for help. Wilson stormed through the dusty streets, his mind boiling with anger. His plan had failed. He needed help, fast. He made his way to the small wooden shop where his old friend Tunde usually sat drinking and playing cards. When Wilson arrived, Tunde was sitting outside sipping cheap beer. "Tuned," Wilson called angrily. Tunde looked up, surprised. "Wilson, my man, what brings you here this hot afternoon?" Wilson didn't smile. He went straight to the point. "I thought you said that poison would work," Wilson said in a low, angry voice. "You told me whoever drinks it will sleep forever." Tunde laughed nervously and scratched his head. "Well, that's what they told me too. Maybe you didn't use enough?" Wilson's face grew darker. "I want another one, stronger." Tunde shook his head quickly. No, my friend. I don't have another one. And even if I had, I wouldn't give it to you. This matter is dangerous, Wilson. Very dangerous." Wilson clenched his fists. He was not happy. He had risked everything, and now he was stuck. Tunde, trying to change the topic, said, "By the way, have you heard the news?" Wilson grunted. "What news?" Tunde leaned closer, lowering his voice like it was a secret. "The king is looking for his lost grandson. He even put a 50 million naira reward. Imagine, 50 million. Ah, how I wish I knew where that child was. My life would change overnight. I would become an instant millionaire." Wilson rolled his eyes and spat on the ground. "Whatever," he said coldly. "I'm not interested. Those people are wicked. Do you even know I was supposed to marry the Queen years ago?" Tunde's eyes widened. "What? You and the Queen?" Wilson nodded bitterly. "Yes, when we were young. I approached her, I begged her to love me, but no. She rejected me because I wasn't royal enough. She was looking for a prince, not a poor village boy like me." He laughed bitterly. "I wish their son is never found. Wilson said with venom in his voice. That family is selfish, proud, and foolish. Tunde looked worried and shook his head. Wilson, don't talk like that. The child is innocent. It's not his fault. Don't curse the child because of what happened between you and the Queen. Innocent blood is dangerous to fight against. Wilson snorted loudly. Well, I don't know where the child is. Good luck to them. Let them keep searching till they grow old. Without waiting for a reply, Wilson turned and walked away angrily, leaving Tunde staring after him. Meanwhile, back at the palace, King Edward sat on his golden throne, thinking deeply. His heart was heavy with worry. Since the news went out about his missing grandson, no one had come forward yet. The palace was quiet, but the king's mind was loud with fear. Suddenly, the chief priest entered the royal hall quickly, his face full of seriousness. "My king," he called out, bowing low before the throne. The king sat up straight, feeling a chill in the air. "What is it?" King Edward asked, his voice tight with fear. The chief priest looked up, his eyes dark with worry. "My king, the child, your grandson, is in serious danger." King Edward's face turned pale. He gripped the arms of his throne tightly. "What do we do?" the king asked, his voice shaking. "How can we find him and save him?" The chief priest stepped forward and spoke calmly. "Don't worry too much, my king. I am working on it. I am praying and fighting in the spirit. I will try my best to slow down the evil plans of the enemy." The king stood up from his throne, desperate. "Please do anything it takes to save my grandson," he said. "I will pay you anything you ask, gold, land, anything. Just bring him back safely." The chief priest bowed again. "I will do my best, your majesty," he said. "The gods are watching. The enemy will not win." Wilson walked back home with an evil plan burning in his mind. When he reached the house, he went straight into the bedroom, where his weak wife, Margaret, was lying. She was still very weak, but she could hear and understand him a little. Wilson sat on the bed and looked at her with a wicked smile. "You can hear me, Margaret, can't you?" he said coldly. "Good. Let me tell you something." He leaned closer and said in a harsh voice, "Years ago I loved the Queen. I wanted to marry her, but she rejected me like trash because I was poor. She chose a prince over me." Wilson's face twisted with anger as he spoke. "Now it's payday. I will sell that boy, yes, the one you love so much. I will sell him to travelers, strangers who will take him far away. That is how I will punish the royal family. That is the pain I will cause them for rejecting me." Margaret's weak hand moved slightly, but she was too weak to stop him. "You foolish woman," Wilson spat, standing up. "You love that boy more than you love me. I see it. That's why I poisoned your food. I will abandon you here. You will slowly suffer and go and meet your parents in hell." Without mercy, Wilson went to where little Gift was playing quietly, unaware of what was happening. "Come with me," Wilson said roughly, grabbing Gift by the arm. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Gift asked innocently, looking up at him. "Don't ask me questions, you little rat," Wilson barked. Gift's small feet hurried to follow him. He looked back sadly at the house, wanting to see his mummy. "I want to go back to Mummy," Gift said softly, tears filling his eyes. Wilson looked down at him with hatred. "She is not your mother," Wilson shouted, "and I am not your father. You are nothing to me." Gift didn't understand. His young heart broke into pieces. He started crying quietly as Wilson dragged him along the dusty road. After a long walk, they reached an abandoned corner where 3 rough-looking men were waiting by an old truck. Wilson pushed Gift toward them and said, "This is the boy. Take him." One of the men threw a dirty sack into the truck and nodded. Wilson stretched out his hand. "Where is the money?" The man pulled out a dirty bundle of cash and gave Wilson 100,000 naira. Wilson counted it quickly and smiled. "I don't care about the king's reward," Wilson said with an evil grin. "I prefer this money in my hand now. At least I have done my revenge. I have given them pain, just like they gave me." Without even saying goodbye to little Gift, Wilson turned and walked away, leaving the boy crying as the strangers threw him into the back of the truck like a bag of rice. Gift's tiny voice cried out into the evening air, "Mummy, Mummy!" But there was no one to hear him. The truck engine roared to life, and they drove away into the night, taking Gift far from the only home he had ever known. And Wilson, smiling like a madman, counted his dirty money again and again. Instead of going back home to check on his sick wife, Wilson, with his dirty money tucked deep in his pocket, decided to go to his friend Tunde's house. When he arrived, he found Tunde sitting outside. "Wilson, you again?" Tunde said, surprised. "What are you doing here this late?" Wilson sat down heavily on a bench, acting tired and sad. "My wife and son have travelled," he lied smoothly. "They went for a wedding far away. I am tired of being alone. The house is empty and boring." Tunde raised an eyebrow, sensing that something didn't feel right. But he didn't want trouble, so he just nodded and kept quiet. While Wilson was busy drinking and laughing at his friend's house, something was happening back at his home. The noisy neighbour, Mama Janet, had come again to look for Margaret. She wanted to ask for Pepper this time, but when she knocked and nobody answered, she pushed the door open. Inside, she found Margaret lying very weak on the bed, barely breathing. Mama Janet screamed, "Jesus! Margaret, what happened to you?" Mama Janet didn't waste time. She shouted for help and some neighbours rushed in. Together they quickly carried Margaret to the nearest hospital. The doctors and nurses worked fast. They gave her drip and medicine. After some time, Margaret opened her eyes, confused but alive. God had saved her. Meanwhile, at the stranger's house deep inside the bush, the three men who had bought little Gift were drunk and fast asleep. They planned to travel early the next morning to a faraway town to sell the boy and never be found. But that night, while everyone slept, the chief priest, using his spiritual powers, reached out to Gift through his dreams. Gift, still a small, innocent 2-year-old, didn't understand what was happening. In his sleep, he slowly stood up, not fully awake. His small feet quietly carried him toward the door. The chief priest's power kept him safe and silent. The door creaked open as if by magic, but the drunk men were too deep in sleep to hear anything. Still sleeping, Gift walked out of the house, barefoot, into the thick bush. The chief priest was already waiting for him. As soon as Gift stepped out into the night, the chief priest appeared from the shadows, smiling warmly. "Come, my child," he said gently. Gift, half asleep and half awake, followed him without fear. The chief priest held his tiny hand carefully and led him through the bush, guiding him safely to the palace. It was already very late at night when they reached the king's palace. The guards at the gate were shocked to see the chief priest coming with a small boy. They quickly opened the gates and they went straight to the king's royal chamber. King Edward was still awake, praying and hoping for a miracle. When he saw the chief priest walk in with a little boy, he jumped up from his seat. "What is this?" the king asked, confused. The chief priest bowed slightly. "My king, here is your grandson." The king's mouth fell open. He rushed forward and knelt before the boy, looking into his face closely. Tears filled his eyes. He looked so much like Amelia when she was a baby. This is him?" the king asked in a shaky voice. The chief priest nodded calmly. "Yes, my king. Thank the gods. They have done a miracle for you." The king wanted to ask more questions. Where did they find him? Who had kept him all this time? How did they find him in the middle of the night? But the chief priest raised his hand and said, "My king, it is too late for too many questions. Just thank the gods for saving your blood. We will talk about everything tomorrow." The king nodded quickly, too emotional to even speak. Immediately, he ordered his servants to prepare a warm bath and food for the boy. He called his personal doctor to check on Gift, to make sure he was healthy and safe. That same night, the king picked up his phone and called his daughter, Princess Amelia, who was still in school. "Amelia," he said urgently, "come to the palace first thing tomorrow morning. It is very important." Amelia was worried. She had never heard her father sound like that before. "Yes, Papa," she said, sitting up in bed, heart beating fast. "I will be there." As she ended the call, Amelia had no idea that the son she thought was lost forever had finally come home. The next morning, Princess Amelia arrived at the palace very early. Her heart was beating very fast as she walked into the royal hall. There, standing beside her father, was a small boy, about 2 years old. Amelia stopped and stared at him. Something deep inside her moved. Slowly, Amelia walked closer, her hands shaking. She bent down and gently took the boy's hand. As she turned his little wrist, her eyes filled with tears. There it was, a small birthmark shaped like a half moon. Tears rolled down Amelia's cheeks. "I remember this mark," she cried, her voice breaking. "When I gave birth alone in the bush, I saw this mark on my baby's wrist. This child belongs to me." The king stood up from his throne, his face serious. "My daughter," the king said carefully, "I believe you. But we must be sure. We must run a DNA test. It is important for the kingdom. We must remove every doubt." Amelia nodded quickly, wiping her tears. "Yes, Papa, let's do it. I know in my heart he is my son," she said. The king immediately called the royal doctor to prepare for the DNA test. The DNA test was done immediately. Everyone at the palace waited anxiously for the result. 2 days later, the result came back. And it was 100% positive. Gift was truly the son of Princess Amelia and Daniel. The palace exploded with joy. The king cried openly for the first time in front of his guards. Amelia hugged her son tightly, thanking God again and again. "This boy will never suffer again," the king promised. "He will live like the prince he was born to be." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Mrs. Wilson was now fully recovered. 2 weeks had passed since Mama Janet and the neighbors had saved her life. She was strong enough to walk and talk properly. One morning, she woke up and said to herself, "I must go to the palace. I must tell the truth." She dressed up neatly and went straight to the royal palace. When she arrived, the guards tried to stop her, but she begged them. "Please," she said, "I have important news for the king about his grandson." When the king heard, he ordered them to bring her in immediately. Mrs. Wilson knelt down before the king and began to talk. She told him everything, how she and her wicked husband had found the baby in the bush 2 years ago, how she had loved and cared for the child like her own, and how her husband had always disliked Gift. Tears ran down Mrs. Wilson's cheeks as she continued. "My king," she said, "my husband poisoned my food because I wanted to return your grandson to you. He called him cursed, he hated him, and he even sold him to strangers." The king's face grew darker with anger as he listened. "My king," Mrs. Wilson added, "even though I was very weak, I secretly recorded him when he was confessing his evil plans to me before he left the house with Gift." She brought out her phone and played the recording. The whole palace was silent as Wilson's wicked words filled the room. The king was happy that Mrs. Wilson had saved his grandson, but he was also very angry. "How can a man be this wicked?" the king shouted. "He sold my own son and tried to unalive his wife." Without wasting time, the king ordered his chief of security to call the police immediately. That same day, Wilson was found at his usual drinking spot with his useless friends. The police grabbed him before he could even run. After a quick trial, the court sentenced Wilson to 30 years imprisonment for 2 major crimes: attempted murder of his wife, human trafficking by selling a child. Wilson cried and begged, but the judge refused to pity him. It was too late. As for Mrs. Wilson, the king then made a royal announcement. "For saving my grandson, for risking your life, and for standing for truth even when it was hard," the king said, "I reward you with a beautiful mansion and a very large amount of money so you can live in peace and happiness for the rest of your life." Tears filled Mrs. Wilson's eyes. She knelt down and cried in gratitude. "Thank you, my king. Thank you. May God bless you and your family forever." But the king was not done. He also called Mama Janet, the noisy neighbor who had helped save Mrs. Wilson's life. "You too are a hero," the king said. "Because you rushed her to the hospital that night, the truth could be revealed." The king gave Mama Janet a good amount of money to say thank you. And as for Thunder, the wicked friend who had given Wilson the poison, he was also arrested. Even though he claimed he didn't know Wilson's evil plan, the court found him guilty of helping indirectly. Thunder was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for aiding crime. As for the dangerous men who bought little Gift from Wilson, they were never found. They disappeared like smoke in the wind. But the palace announced that if they were ever found, they would face the full wrath of the law. Years passed. Amelia and Daniel finally got married in a grand royal wedding. The whole kingdom celebrated for days. Gift, now a bright, joyful prince, walked proudly beside his parents on their wedding day. The dark days were over. The palace was once again filled with laughter, love, and the sweet sound of hope. Dear viewers, What lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.